The sound is really, really good.
Okay, good.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? This is
I'm good.
exciting.
It is. It is. We've, I've met you a little while ago, and I've known of you for a while,
Yeah.
but it's super exciting to be here today, actually chatting about some important things
Yeah,
for
I think
PhDs.
last time we were on Natalia's, she had a panel, didn't she? About
Exactly.
interview bloopers, and we shared them, which was
Yes.
really funny because
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
had a few.
Exactly. No, yeah, that was a great
Mhm.
conversation, and yeah, it's funny because it's easy on social media to see people's victories, the things they did well, and it was fun to kind of give
Yeah.
an indication of look out for this, don't do that. I did this, and
Yeah.
this is what happened.
Hands up. That's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Um, yeah, so super happy to have you here, and thank you for your time because I know
No, thank you for the invitation.
you're
I've
quite
been
busy.
listening to your podcast for a while, so this is it's really exciting.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to have you here because knowing all that you do with Biomed Badass and just the work you do, the work you do at Novartis, for example. It's really cool for me to have someone with your profile come on the show because really I want each episode to have really valuable take home messages and I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of nuggets today.
I hope so. I hope I don't disappoint your audience.
Oh, no.
I will try not to, I promise.
So no, you won't for sure. So this is it's a live taping. We're live on different platforms, and the audio will be used. I'll edit it and use it as the podcast. But so this means that in a few seconds, I'm just checking here on the different platforms that everything's okay. But I'll start like a podcast episode. I'll share your bio, and then we'll start the conversation from there. Actually, just let me check here. Yep, everything's good on this side, and so the live is going well. Always need to check.
Okay.
Yeah. So Vicky, what I'll do is I'll welcome people to the episode, share your bio, and then, like I said, we'll go from there. And I think we're good to go.
Cool.
I'm good to go if you are.
Yeah.
Welcome to this week's episode of Papa PhD. This week I have with me Dr. Victoria, or as we know her on the social media, Vicky Sherwood. Vicky is an expert scientific writer at Novartis in Dublin, Ireland. Prior to transitioning to the pharmaceutical industry, Vicky was a principal investigator running a skin cancer research lab at the University of Dundee in the UK. In her current role at Novartis, Vicky writes medical communications that disseminate the results of clinical trials, real-world evidence, and clinical opinions to the medical and scientific community. Her work supports Novartis Oncology to effectively communicate clinical research findings from their pipeline and across brands. Vicky also supports STEM professionals secure meaningful work outside academia through her website www.biomedbadass.com. She helps academic researchers understand the non-academic job market, identify careers that align with their values and skills, network productively, prepare applications that get noticed, and interview effectively for private sector jobs. Welcome to Papa PhD, Vicky.
Thanks so much, David. Thanks for the introduction.
It's my pleasure, and that's all that I just said is is a lot of why I'm excited to have you here today. But to begin, maybe what would be one thing you would add to this bio so that people who are watching or listening get to know who Vicky Sherwood is a little bit better?
Okay, can I just start with something not that interesting, but a disclaimer, really, that
Yeah, go
everything
ahead.
I say today is from my own opinion, right? Not
Of course.
Novartis. I'm not here to represent Novartis, although I do work for them, as you explained. So for people to get to know me a bit better, well, I was a bit of a sports enthusiast. I
Okay.
used to play a lot of sports before I had kids. And I still try to get out and do outdoorsy stuff. I like surfing. I like hiking. I used to play soccer to most people. And I did that for years and years and years, but I just don't have time for these things anymore. But so now I watch sports more
Well,
than play them. So the unhealthy side of sports, I guess.
yeah, to live vicariously. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
So surfing in the UK?
Yeah, it's not great.
Okay, but there are spots. Okay.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, and actually the surfing's better in winter, which is a shame, right? Because it's too cold, and I like my water sports frozen in the winter. You know, I like to ski and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not keen on going in the sea. So I tend to go out when it's not great in the summer. But yeah, I mean, it's not Hawaii, right? So
of course.
No, deal with what we got.
I understand. Even in Portugal, where I come from, the winter sea is it's really freezing. it's really hard. You need to have really thick, how do you call it, wetsuit or something.
Yeah, but you have great surfing there in some spots, right?
There's some really great spots, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I know that because a lot of people that I see surfing in Ireland, they go to Portugal for holidays or like surfing retreats. It's
there's
a
bunch
popular
of spots.
hotspot.
It's true. And in the summer is really pleasant, and the beaches are really nice too. And the food and the people, blah, blah, blah. Oh. Don't get me going.
Oh, God. Do you get to go back much or not?
Not too much, but like next year I'm supposed to go in the summer. Yeah,
right.
But it's, we try to get my parents to come. We try to share the load of coming and going.
Not easy during a pandemic.
No, we had to stop completely. And I think it's the reality for a lot of people who were abroad when it hit, was that unless they could, I don't know, even going by land, it must have been difficult for people to just cross borders. So
right, yeah. I mean, I live in Ireland and I'm from the UK, and the flight is less than an hour, and I felt like I might as well have gone and lived in New Zealand. For as much as I didn't go back for nearly 2 years.
That's it. Yeah. There was a trip. My parents were supposed to come right when it hit, and of course that was, they couldn't. They had to cancel their tickets, and it was until today there was no possibility to meet. But next year it's going to be
fingers crossed. Fingers
crossed.
Yeah.
So today we are here to talk about something that might, that a lot of people are curious about, especially if they're still at the lab in academia, which is big pharma, which is what does the life look like in big pharma? How do I fit as a PhD or as someone who went to grad school in big pharma? And I know you have experience there, but also I'm sure you've had a lot of conversations about that. And I know you've helped people do that transition. So yeah, I'm really, really excited to have this conversation, because I'm sure for a lot of people in the biomedical domain, in the life sciences, it is one of the doorways that you kind of see if you want to leave academia, but that can leave you, it can be daunting a little bit. There are huge organizations, the culture, people don't, before experiencing it, people don't really know what it is. So yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's that's a huge question, David. Where do I start? So working in big pharma, I mean, it's completely different to academia. But I mean, pharma look to STEM professionals particularly to help them do most of the work that they do, right? Because it's technology based. And if you think about a pharma product, you go through that development phase, that long lead-in phase before you get launched. And then at the point of launch, it goes through, a life cycle of quick sales, growing sales. And then eventually it will start to, once it's reached maturity, then peter off as you reach that patent cliff. And I think it's often quite common for scientists to think, well, the best place that they fit is obviously in that very early preclinical development phase. And I think traditionally, that's probably a bit how the pharma industry saw scientists as well. That was their place.
Bring
I
them
think
to the lab.
So yeah, bring your skills to the lab, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that transition in some ways is easier because your skills are directly transferable to the lab, right? Those technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I think as things have progressed, technology has increased. As patients want to know more about their disease, we're all living for longer. The global population is expanding. People are living with chronic diseases, and they want to understand what is the best technology to help them manage their disease into late life. They want, a good long life, right? With they don't want to be incapacitated for the rest of it. They want to have the best life they can have, right? And I think that general interest from the public has changed healthcare.
Okay.
And on top of that, healthcare is becoming more and more expensive, and it's becoming more difficult for payers, insurance companies, governments, whoever's funding the healthcare system, to be able to access all those technologies. And a pharma works, it operates in that marketplace of healthcare. And so all these challenges and things that the pharma company are facing, they go into after the products have been launched, right? Throughout the entire product life cycle. And I think what a lot of scientists don't appreciate is pharma needs scientists throughout that entire spectrum of a product life cycle to communicate, to talk with doctors, to understand. There's so much more than just the preclinical development. And there's, of course, all the clinical development as well. So there is so much space within pharma for people with STEM training. And I think that's a message that, it is on us in pharma to get that out so that people understand, that we need them and we need their talents. And we need to get that message to academia.
This is really interesting to me because one of the things that I try to tell people when they come to me is you're not just a person who knows how to do a Western blot, how to pipette, how to sequence. People are, a host of things. People have, passions. People have hobbies. They like to do sports. They're complete beings. And as a young researcher, there's a gamut of different skills that people have that are not related specifically to the technique that they're using, to the technology that they're using, but some are great speakers, some are great at creating posters or actually have blogs on their research domain, and I think more and more people and even graduate schools are helping young researchers spread a little bit more into those domains of communication, science communication, outreach sometimes. And it feels to me that in that life cycle that you just mentioned, if someone is really more technology inclined, they can fit in more of a beginning part, like you said, which is kind of the natural thing you think of immediately. But someone who loves to write, or even writes articles for, let's say, a science journal or whatever, there's other places where there's going to be different, let's say, job descriptions where they will fit along that path of the life cycle, right? You yourself are in the writing part of things, right?
Yeah, I'm in the communication, so I work across the whole product life cycle, depending on which brand or, before it's even a brand, right? Early in the pipeline.
When it's just numbers and letters.
Yeah, exactly. So we work across that whole spectrum, and you're absolutely right. There are so many transferable skills that scientists bring that they learn, during their studies in grad school. That the pharma companies need, and it's not just communications, because if we think about a product coming through that, I talked about that life cycle of the product. So you get through the clinical development phase, you show that your product is effective, it's safe in a very predefined population, right? In your clinical trial, in your phase 3 clinical trial. And in that randomized control trial, you'll take that to the FDA and you'll say, look, in this population, it works, it's safe. We would like to now take it to the market, and we would like to sell it to these people under this indication. And at that point, if you get approval from the FDA, you're licensed to go and sell your drug. And so at that point, it becomes a brand, right? And it becomes on label, and a lot of things change. But the FDA aren't stupid. They know that you are going to take this into a much larger population, more genetically diverse. In the clinical trial, you've been asking people to come in with set criteria, how many drugs have they taken in the past, and so it's a very predefined population. So when you're going out into the marketplace and there's maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe more, getting your drug, the FDA want to know, is there a safety indication that pops up? Is it still effective? With all the things that people are doing, like they haven't controlled what they eat, their diet, or whether they're sticking to the dosing, all these sorts of things. And you have to, as a pharma company, to maintain your license, you have to gather that data. You have to keep retelling the FDA, yes, it's safe. Here's our data. This might be an indication. We need to investigate this further. You need to be upfront and transparent about that. And we know of examples where drugs have gone into the marketplace and they've been withdrawn because of that data. And so we need scientists to interpret that data as well, and keep feeding that back and communicating that to the agencies. So there's a whole gamut of technical support that's needed across that product life cycle. Well into launch and beyond. So it's a really exciting space, I think. And I'm just keen to get that that message out there, that there is so many options. And somebody gave me great advice when I first started working in pharma. And as you mentioned, I work in communications, and they said to me, there's so many different things you could work on. There's so many therapeutic areas. There's so many types of communications. There's so many, you could work on brands, you could work on really early products, you could work with this company. There's so many companies. There's so many options. Don't ever feel like when you get into the industry and you find yourself in not the right place, don't ever feel stuck, because there's plenty of other things to try. If you find yourself in somewhere you don't like, or you're not finding it interesting, or it's not intellectually stimulating enough, or whatever, there's so many other things to try. Just keep looking. And that was very reassuring when I first broke into the industry, to know that there are options there. And once I've got a bit of experience, I can start diversifying my skill set further. So it's really a great space to be.
That's really interesting, and I really want to. There's so many things that you've said that I want to talk about, but let's follow up. That what you just said is, if you once you have your foot in the door, let's say, and you have this position, how does it work in terms of the dynamics of, I got into this position, it's not fulfilling me completely. How do you get from point A to point B of, I'd really like to try going, to work with the marketing team, let's say, on blah, blah, or how does that mobility within an organization, within a corporation, and within teams, how does that work? How is that negotiated? How do you go about then, once you get at the ground floor, moving along, up, sideways, whatever, but how does that go?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it's actually something that I would like to talk a bit more about on various platforms. I think it's quite important, and I've learned a lot of it. I've only been in, I have to say, the caveat is I've only been in the industry for about 5 years, so I'm still learning as well. But what I've picked up in these 5 years is that you have to be fairly proactive about that, right? You have to be able to put your hand up and say, I think I'd be interested in learning a bit more about this. I think it's very typical that as a scientist, with technical expertise and therapeutic area expertise, you come into something and you almost become pigeonholed as somebody with that technical expertise. And they think, okay, Vicky, she works in oncology as a writer. Right, so it's easy for me to be pigeonholed as an oncology writer, and I think to a large degree that's what my resume screams, right? Because that's what my experience shows. So if I want to try and learn a new skill set or diversify, I've learned that very early on, I have to find the right people. So people who are connected within that company, people who have a voice when you're not in the room, right? Who are going to say, oh, I think Vicky might like to try that. She said she'd be interested in learning more about this, and this is an interesting project, and I think she'd be well fit, be a good fit. And I've learned to try and figure out and navigate that, and then try and get my messages across, saying, I would like to learn more about this area. And I think you've got to try and be quite proactive, and you do need somebody who's going to speak for you be it a mentor or even a line manager, somebody that, you know, is in a position to speak for you, especially in an organization that's as large as a big pharma company. Because it is very difficult to get lost in the weeds in a company that size, and very easy to be pigeonholed as the writer in that therapeutic area or the R&D scientist working on those vaccines. You know, I think it's, if you want to diversify out, of course, if you want to stay a specialist, perfect, because within industry, you know, you can specialize and become that specialist and stay as that specialist, that go-to person for that information. But likewise, if you want to diversify, I think it's kind of on you to almost put yourself out there and show you want that, and maybe do some training in your free time, and say to your boss, you know, I've done these LinkedIn courses. I want to learn more about X, Y, and Z. What options are there for me? Are there any projects I could get involved in? Is there anyone I could work shadow, or maybe a team that I could go and work for 3 months? And so you've got to be quite proactive, I think, would be my answer to that.
That sounds really logical, and so self-advocating is important, networking also, but I kind of want to go back and talk. You know, you talked about the life cycle of a pharmaceutical product, but I kind of want to go and talk about the life cycle of the young researcher who jumps into big pharma, and how, you know, and what type of conversation, what type of habits they might not have from coming from research, from academia, and that they need to pick up right away. Because what I'm feeling is you need to learn the culture, and then you need to gain some habits that are going to help you. You talked about something that I am always very curious about, because I didn't get I didn't find someone that I can consider a mentor during my graduate school. And a mentor, it's, you know, it's someone not in your lab. It's someone who kind of is your champion, and is kind of has an outside look on what things are happening. And it seems to me that there must be some habits that you must gain to allow yourself within an organization to find someone who can play this role of mentor. Because if you're a little bit more reserved, shy, I don't know, it might be difficult. Anyway, I'm putting, there's a lot of layers to what I'm saying, but let's talk about this thing of finding a mentor. And I think this is useful not only for people outside academia, but also inside. But how do you go about, within a large organization, how do you go about finding someone who can become potentially a mentor for you and a champion for you?
I think you used the right word there, champion, because, you know, a mentor's great and someone you can bounce ideas off, but ideally you want someone who's going to champion you, which is what I was saying about behind that closed door, what that conversation is. Who's going to put their hand up and say, I think Vicky's a good person for that. That's kind of what you've got to find. And I'm afraid you do find that through doing a bit of networking. And early on in my career, I apologize. Sorry.
It's fine.
My phone going off.
You can start again at earlier in my career. The magic of editing will take care of it.
Early on in my career, I was not good at networking. I mean, I just was not. I just thought, what a frivolous activity. You know, it's for salespeople. It's not for me. I'm a serious scientist. Yeah, I'm not going to work the room or dress to impress or any of these things. You know, I thought it was sleazy and below me. And actually, you know, it was a pretty arrogant outlook, I think, because actually what I've discovered over time is that networking is more about building relationships. And I started to see it as, I do this anyway, right? I have friendships, you know, with people. I build relationships with them. Why should being in a professional environment be any different, right? Professional networking is about building relationships, and that's all about, you know, building rapport, finding common ground, and all those types of things. So I think what you've got to do is pretty much try and talk to as many people as you can within the organization. Now, of course, that's difficult now that we have a lot of remote working. A lot of people, you know, are not in an office. There's no water cooler chat as such. And so it boils down to pretty much putting yourself out there and just asking the question blatantly, who should I be talking to next? who should I be talking to about this? And I think one of the best things that served me is really boiling down a few key messages that I want to get out there. And then using those messages to kind of reinforce where I wanted to go next or what I wanted to learn more about. So I'll give you an example. When I was transitioning out of academia, obviously I was leaving academia, it's a new identity. I was coming into this new industry. I didn't know anything about it, but I'd realized that how I got the job in the first place was by explaining that I like to take complex scientific information and I like to distill it to simple messaging. And I also knew, the other thing I knew was that, I'd been a PI. So I was obviously older coming into this industry. I was coming in with people who were in their 20s, right, starting off. And so I thought it would be quite important to explain where I'd come from and my background. And that I had this 18 years of oncology experience, work or cancer research experience working in academia. So I use these three messages, right? I use these three messages all the time. So when somebody introduced me, I said, oh, hi, I'm Vicky. I'm an ex-PI. I used to work in skin cancer research. I've always enjoyed taking complex scientific messages and condensing scientific information, condensing into simple messages. And I would use that reinforcement way of introducing myself all the time to begin with. And then people would say, oh, there's Vicky. She always liked writing. So she's come into the academic, from an academic background into the industry. And she's got a lot of oncology experience. So we've got this new project starting with this new drug in prostate cancer. Maybe Vicky would be interested in working on those projects. And through that messaging, I realized things were coming my way because I kept reinforcing the message. And it was all about really learning how to change people, how to influence what people were saying when I wasn't in the room, in a way, reinforcing all the time those messages, because I wanted those cancer projects. I wanted to learn more about that. I wanted to use my skill set that I was bringing with me. And so that set me in good stead. And when I started to think, later on, I might like to diversify my skills further, I would start incorporating new messages into things that I was saying to people. And sometimes it happens where you get introduced to your boss's boss, right? They come to the office, or there's, I don't know, a round table event, and they say, oh, hi, who are you? And it's a perfect time when you've got those messages, that you can get them out there. So in the back of your mind, they're there. And there doesn't need to be many. I would say no more than 3. You don't want to be implanting more than 3 pieces of information. The mind can't process more than 3 or 4 things at any one time. But that continuous reinforcement really does help. And I just wished I'd used that earlier on in my career. I think I'd have gone faster, quicker. But it's been a really good thing. And so when I started at Novartis, and I started at Novartis at the beginning of the year, I came in with a certain few things I wanted to say. And I realized pretty quickly I need to know people who understand the part of the organization in which I work, which is the scientific writing team. And so I started to find people within that scientific writing team that I thought would be able to have a voice for me, and I would be able to implant those messages on. And so kind of, it sounds very strategic and very pre-planned, but it's kind of just, you can incorporate it into your daily work and meet people and kind of reinforce that messaging. And it really does go a long way, because I used to make a big mistake when I was in academia, because I used to always tell people when I hadn't got a grant, I used to go, oh no, I haven't got that grant again. And, what is going to happen to me? It's terrible. And I realized what people were saying was, they were saying, oh, Vicky, over coffee or whatever, my name would come up and they say, oh, Vicky didn't get that grant again. And so that messaging would be reinforced, that negative messaging all the time. And I didn't realize, that is damaging, right? To have that kind of reinforced negative messaging. So I thought, I'm going to change this, and I'm going to enforce what I want the messaging to be. And I think that is generally a good strategy for any career, really. So anyway, it's working out for me at the minute.
No, for sure. And it makes total sense to me. It makes me think that, the words have more power than we imagine especially when they start echoing in other chambers, either positively or negatively, like you just said. And it makes me, anyway, it makes me think about different things. But one thing that it makes me think, and I just published, so this week's episode that came out on the podcast is about marketing yourself as a young researcher, and it makes me think of personal branding. And if there's this there's books about business model you, let's say,
Hmm.
and what it sounds to me is like you are working the way this method that you found out works is kind of a personal branding method, but projecting to where you want to go. It's kind of it's like if you unconsciously, or you found a way to always have kind of a short elevator pitch of you and of where you want to be. It could be in academia, but it can also be within an organization. And this way, if you somehow are in the elevator with the boss of your boss of your boss, you have that like 90-second boom. I am this person. I like doing this. I'd love to do that. These are my strengths. Ding! We arrived at the 7th floor. Thank you. Bye bye. And you'll have planted those ideas in the person's ear and in the person's brain, and eventually you'll come up, top of mind whenever that arises. I love it. I really, really find it super interesting.
That is so true. But I don't like to pitch, or I try not to give it as a pitch. I try to give it more conversationally, so it doesn't necessarily all have to come together the way I said it. But I will implant those kind of messages into the conversation somehow.
Yeah.
I will try to get them in there somehow. So yes, it is. It's exactly that. It's personal branding. But we're ditching the pitch idea.
Yeah. It just made me, because it has all the elements of it, right? But of course,
it is.
It can sound artificial if you do it, if it's too scripted, for sure.
Right, and I don't think anyone likes to be sold to, do they? Certainly not in an elevator or over a round table coffee discussion or something.
Yeah, I think pitches have their moments where they're where they are logical to you. It's they're supposed to be used, but I understand what you're saying, but I think that the process of finding these 3 points, the process of working towards having them and knowing them, the process is the same as if you were finding out, okay, what do I need to say in a pitch. That's why it came to mind.
Yeah, that's so right, though. That's so true. The process is the same, because I always try to have a super skill in there, or super strength. Something that I want to be remembered for, because I think I've found as well, when you ask people, what do they say about you in a closed room? When you think about that question, what do you think people say about you when you're not there? A lot of people say, oh, I'd like to think, or I hope they say that I'm nice, or I'm friendly, or very rarely I find people are talking about somebody's personality. They might tag that on to something, but usually they're talking about, oh, they're skilled in this. Oh, and they happen to be also really easy to talk to. They might tag on a personality thing, but your name usually comes up when there's a skill or a need or something being talked about. So if you're reinforcing what your strength, your super strength is, or just your skills in some way, that's when your name might come up at the right moment. So I always, in those 3 elements that I'm talking about any one time, I always try to have a strength in there, some kind of something I want to be noted for. So in the example before, it was, obviously taking complex information, because I wanted to break into the writing field, into the scientific writing field. But when I was in there, I also wanted to be known as somebody with expertise in oncology. So I just told as many people as I could that I came with these expertise in cancer research. And so I always try to have those kind of things in there as well, as I said, so that if interesting projects come up, maybe my name will at some point.
Yeah, and they did it. They did it. It seems
they did. So far.
That's really, really, really great advice. Now, and I think this can be used at different steps, because I was talking about the life cycle of the employee coming straight out of academia, and the first step that usually I mention is, while you're still doing your research in academia, is start talking with people, do informational interviews. And I feel that having also these 3 messages on the back of your mind can also help in that setting. Is that something you've seen? How did the transition go for you, those first conversations that brought you to your first pharma job?
I could talk about this. I could wax lyrical on this for the whole day, David, be warned, because I am such an advocate for networking, because that is exactly how I made the transition. I didn't do the scattergun approach of apply for everything. I basically decided what I wanted to do through informational interviewing. And at that point, I spoke to more writers, because I knew I decided I wanted to be a writer in the pharma industry, doing various types of writing and communications. So I spoke to people across the spectrum. Then I discovered that I was specifically interested in medical communications, which is an area of scientific writing in the pharma industry. And so at that point, I wanted to talk to more medical communications writers. And it was at that point, through talking to them and learning the language of what they did, that I started to be able to use that same language, which made me more of a credible candidate. And through those conversations, I actually got introduced to the decision makers, people at their companies who were hiring or had influence to influence the hiring managers, right? And through those conversations, I got invited to interviews. So in the end, I started to realize which companies I thought were the best ones. And I had a list of 5 that I wanted to target. I was based in the UK at the time, and they were all in London. And I was in Scotland, so I knew we were going to have to move down to London because there was no remote working. This was pre-pandemic. And or no remote working, sorry, for entry level. There was remote working for senior staff. And so I pinpointed those 5 companies. I targeted employees in those 5 companies. And through those conversations, I then started to, as I said, get linked through to the hiring managers. And it was through those conversations with the hiring managers, I got the interviews. And I think from those 5 companies, I got invited to, I applied for 4 in the end. I got invited for 3 interviews and I got 2 offers. So,
awesome.
it was very, very targeted. But it's time consuming because, you have to have that lead in. So you have to give yourself time. It's no good submitting the thesis and then worrying about getting a job. You have to be leading into this 6 to 12 months in advance if you want to do that approach. But I think it's a far more effective approach because you have more chance of getting something that's right for you rather than just falling into something because it's available or because you've managed to get it at the last minute.
Exactly. I totally agree, and it really talks to the power of networking, and I'm really happy that you share this because, especially if if you were very involved or exclusively involved in your research and didn't do any networking, what will happen is that what you said, you're gonna send CVs to I don't know how many. Job postings, and it can take the same time, and you won't be building any relationships through that process. You'll just be a couple of sheets of paper on someone's desk that they'll look through, and maybe you'll interest them. And here, it feels like, yes, it takes time, and building relationships, human relationships takes time, but it feels that the one conversation, the next, there's always a brick that you're adding to this wall after one conversation. Maybe it's a terminology that you learned, maybe it's a new job description that you didn't know existed, and then there's just the human aspect of building this network. I think I would advocate for that 100%. Like you said, you could talk a lot about it. I think it's the way to go. It's networking, and now we're you can network with people who are across the globe today through LinkedIn, let's say, and so I think it's a missed opportunity to not do it, even if you're shy. It doesn't come easily. On a platform that's built like LinkedIn, it's not menacing at all. People are ready. If they're on LinkedIn, they're ready to be approached. So don't be scared of bugging them. And if they don't answer, it's probably because they're too busy. But you'd be surprised how many people are ready and happy to share some of their paths, some of their know-how, and just to talk with someone who is interested, who has common interests with them.
That's so true. And I think if you do target people who've been through the same journey, right? So anyone who's come out of grad school and struggled with that same transition, they're often willing to give back. I was so pleasantly surprised how many people gave me time. There's a few rules to follow. And the first is to try is find that common ground. And then I think state, I will only take 10 or 15 minutes of your time, and then be really strict with that. Because often that's all you need, right? Just to make that first approach and build that connection and start to learn that terminology and build your candidacy, your credibility as a candidate. I don't think it takes a lot of time up front. And often once it gets to the 15 minutes that you said you would have, people will allow you an extra 5 or 10 minutes. Often if the conversation's flowing and you've built rapport, they'll allow that. Just be very upfront and say, I realize we're at our time. We can follow this on later, or maybe I could reach out to you later on. And then often they'll say, oh no, we can, continue the conversation. So I think, make it easy for somebody, and the chances are you will receive a positive response, and they will help you. And the other thing is to not ask them for any great things. Like, don't ask them for, here's my CV in advance, my resume, can you please check it? Or is there any jobs going in your company? Anything like that up front. That's not what those kind of conversations are about. Those informational interviews, they're about research. They're about learning about the job, whether it's right for you, whether it's interesting, what's happening in that industry, who are the key players, who could I talk to next? They're the questions you want to be finding out. Because at that point, as you said, you're building that wall with those individual bricks. It's a great analogy, because that's what you're doing. And it takes a few conversations. It takes a long time to do, but it's well worth it. And as you said, the scattergun approach of just sending your resume out, hoping that it sticks somewhere. I would have found that so demoralizing. You hear about people who say, I've applied for 100+ jobs, and you think, how did you get to that point without, being so miserable at the level of rejection? It must have been so difficult to get through that. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And also,
go ahead.
I felt, sorry, I was just going to say, I felt like I didn't know anything outside of academia. I've been in academia for so long. I felt I felt compelled to do these information interviews just to figure out what else was out there.
That's exactly what I was going to say when I interrupted you a little bit, which is, apart from everything that you just said, by having conversations, you'll glean information organically and slowly, but surely, about the culture of this organization, about the day-to-day of this type of job, that by sending a CV, you get nothing back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You'll get no feedback, right, for most of them.
That's it. Vicky, we're getting to the end of the interview, and this has been so interesting, and we focused mainly on one thing, which is networking, but I think it's important to say it, because it is key. It is key to getting your foot in the door, and then it is key to evolving within the organization. We didn't talk about the day-to-day, about the culture, about what culture shock you can have getting in, and maybe we can. The way I'd like to talk about it is, and I'm gonna just put this here. So you have the website Biomed Badass. You help people do this transition, and do you have just now for the end of the interview, considering your experience with Biomed Badass, what would you say from people who come see you asking for your help? What are like 3 or 2, let's say 2 key things that you teach them, or that you open their eyes to, that help them smoothly transition to this new universe that has different habits, different culture, different pace of projects, etc. Is there 1 or 2 key things that either people come to you anxious about, or that when you show people these things, it kind of is an aha moment for them?
I think the 2 key things that people come to me mostly about is what we've spoken about, which is actually that application and how to get that job. And I do get a lot of those people who say, I have been applying for over a year and I've got nowhere. And I know exactly what they've done. They've done the shotgun approach, and they haven't done that kind of networking. So I get a lot of that. So then I try to direct them down the route that I took and say, start building these bridges. And also, you know, you can send your applications out as alongside doing this networking. Why not do both, right? Why not build both of that? And I talk about this on my YouTube channel. I talk about it on my blog and through my newsletter. I was just going to say, if anybody wants to subscribe and learn more, you go to the Biomed Badass website and you can hit the subscribe button for my newsletter, and I send out all the updates. But basically, I talk about this kind of multi-channeled approach to the job search, not just focusing on job boards, because those job boards are candidate magnets, right? And a lot of those people coming to those job boards, and we hear about, you know, at least 200 applicants for most roles at the minute we're reading, which is, you know, a huge amount. And for the biggest companies, it's more than that, right? A lot of those people would be coming with prior industry experience. And it's just natural for hiring managers to think, well, I know this person can do this job, so I'm going to give them the job. I don't know exactly if this person coming from academia can do it, so they seem a bit more of a risk. So in that sort of scenario, we're up against, you know, maybe over 100 people, some of whom have got industry experience. Your chances of transitioning academic is greatly reduced, right? Which is why you need to take this multi-channel, this different approach, because essentially you're taking a career change. Even if you're moving into a lab where you're using the same techniques into an R&D lab, you're still going from one culture, one academic environment where everything's based on knowledge creation, into this industry environment where, you know, it's commercial, you know, it's driven by commercial activity. That's a completely different culture shift. And we mentioned culture a bit, and it is different. So that's probably the first thing that people come to me for. And the second one is a lot of people are just very unsure. They just don't know what there is out there. And as we described at the beginning, the pharma industry is enormous. There's so many things for STEM folks to do. I'm not sure I still know them all. You know, I know a lot of the jobs, I know a lot of the areas, but I'm still discovering new roles and I see new things advertised. And I think, wow, that's a really interesting job. And they're changing all the time. You know, the industry is being revolutionized in a digital way. And we're going to see more jobs coming on that we've not seen before, right? And that's just going to keep going and going. So I think it's just important to talk to people, right? And to get that understanding and learning, and try and learn from people in the industry. I think it's it is difficult in academia because you're in your little academic bubble. But a lot of people within that system have never been anywhere else. They've always been in academia. And so you can't really learn from them, you know, what the industry trends are, what the jobs are out there, because they'll be able to tell you a bit, right? But they're getting that information often secondhand. So it's far better to get the ins and outs and the nitty gritty details from people in that industry. So I guess my answer to both of this is get on LinkedIn, you know, and network and talk to people. And that's an important strategic part of your job search and your transition. It's so important for any career changer.
Yeah. Or if you like to organize things and events, get together with other students and bring alumni from where you are who are now in industry in these positions, bring them to your center and have like their prime, you know, some prime time with them to ask them all these questions. And the fact that you have this commonality with them will make it that you can even, you know, you can go deeper into the questioning. They'll be happy to come and give back to the cohorts that came after them. That's another way to go. And I've talked about it with other guests, and you know, this sometimes this was Adriana Bankston, this program that she started when she was in grad school. It's still going on. People come regularly, alumni, to visit and talk with current students, and that's another way to go. It's a little bit more involved in a way. But, you know, some people are really good at these things and really thrive organizing these types of things. And I think it would be a way to go. But definitely talking with people who are where you think you might want to be, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great approach. But even if your institution doesn't have something as great as that, you can use LinkedIn to find alumni. And LinkedIn did some research actually about connections. They looked at which were the most popular connections that people are most likely to respond to you if you have a connection with. And one of the most common is if you've been to the same school, right? If you've
Mm-hmm.
been to the same university or had the same educational background. And so you can hit the alumni tab on LinkedIn. It will pull everybody up
Mm-hmm.
who's been to your university or your institution. And then you can search through those alumni for your key companies that you're interested in working in. This is another key fact that I think is really important. Try to, as I said, narrow down companies to maybe your top 5 that you want to focus on. And then start looking for people there, because it will give you a target, will give you somewhere to focus your efforts. And that really stood me in good stead as well for the transition. So LinkedIn is an amazing tool. And I think even more now, there's so much out there, information for people that didn't even exist, 6 or 7 years ago when I was thinking about this transition, when I was starting to think about it. If I think about even the Papa PhD podcast would have been great for me during my transition, if we'd had it back then. So there's so much more now, on the internet that you can find, and support and help you can get. So it's good times, I think, if you're thinking of making that move into industry.
It's true. And you, just to go back to the alumni aspect, it makes that first conversation so much easier because of the commonality, because of the of that kind of maybe nostalgia that they might have, and so for sure, don't follow that lead, because it's a really, really good one. Vicky, sadly we've reached the end of the interview. We've talked about your website, and if people who've been watching or listening, if this resonated with you and they want to ask you more questions, follow up on your projects, maybe ask you about what you do, what's the best way to reach you, let's say on social media?
Yeah, well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. I'm on Twitter as well, but sign up for the newsletter as well. Talk to me and correspond with me through that. I focus a lot of my efforts on the pharma industry, on medical communications, which is a specific area I work in as a scientific writer, and generally on transitions out of academia to industry. So if you're interested in any of those or all 3 of them, definitely, feel free to reach out to me, and I try to get back to as many people as I can and answer as many questions as I can. Yeah.
So just look for Vicky Sherwood on LinkedIn and you'll find her for sure.
You will, yeah.
And then if you look for Biomed Badass, also you'll find her work. And I put all those links in the show notes and in the show notes of this interview. Vicky, this was really, really cool. It's funny because we really dove deep into that aspect of networking, and I think it's the first time I spent almost a whole interview talking just about that. But I think that the what was really cool is that first you connected it to your story of how you did things. Second, it's very logical to me what you said, and it totally makes sense. And third, I think people need to, because you hear networking a lot. Like now, it's a term that comes up so much, and people might be tired of. They might glaze over and just by just seeing networking. Okay, someone's again talking about networking, and I think the fact that this is geared, this show is geared to a specific population who might have been so busy during these 3 to 6 years of the PhD that they might have not invested at all in networking. I think it's necessary to kind of normalize it and make people think about it for top of mind when thinking of transitioning careers, because that the shotgun approach is really it's uninspiring and uninspired and
demoralizing.
Demoralizing, and there's this human aspect of communicating with other people and establishing relationships that it lacks completely. And I think in the end, what gets people jobs is that human aspect. And so I'm really, really grateful that you came and that we ended up following that rabbit hole.
And also, absolutely, it's important for your transition, but those skills you will take through, right? Which I'm using now. You will take through your career, wherever you end up. Even if you stay in academia, the best academics, the most successful professors they will be fantastic networkers.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Vicky, This was great. Thank you so much for having been on Papa PhD. It's been a really, really great pleasure.
Thank you so much, David, for the invite. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks.
Well, it was my pleasure. So this ends the podcast, let's say, recording part. Vicky, this was really, really, really great. And again, I think you gave a really good kind of a roadmap. It's funny because the roadmap was the word I used on the thumbnail, and I think you gave people a really great roadmap. And I have people in mind that I'm going to send the link to the episode to, because they're in this process, and I think they're falling into that standard or default of, oh, okay, I'm gonna print CVs and send them out. I think they need to hear this conversation. It's super important, and it's key, I think.
Yeah, I think that trap again of the shotgun. I know we've been through it, but where you start to apply for jobs, you might apply for ones that are really exciting, at the best companies, the top jobs, really difficult to get. And as you get more and more rejections, you just go lower and lower and lower in the expectation you apply for anything. And yeah, you don't need to be like that if you're a scientist. You've got so many skills to give. You need to find something right for you, and I think that this is the right approach to help you do that.
Yeah, and it is how can I say, a paper with your bullet saying what you did does not showcase you as a whole human. As I said, it doesn't showcase your values. It doesn't showcase the energy that you give out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad to imagine that someone going down this lower ends up, after this ordeal that is a PhD and maybe one postdoc, maybe two postdocs, maybe being a PI, going into a job where they feel that they are not, valued as much as they think they should be.
Mm-hmm.
That they maybe are depressed because they just simply don't like it. A place where they don't like the culture. And to prevent all of this, following this at least adding to maybe some sending of CVs, adding an aspect of networking is really, really key, and is going to help a lot.
Absolutely, yeah, and
save
you a lot of time. Save you a lot of time because, like you said, if you end up somewhere it's a disaster, you've got to restart again.
Restart. There you go. Yeah. and then explain why did you quit your other job, and then there's a whole host of things that come after that. Yeah,
there's more hurdles. Yeah, thanks so much, David. It's been great. It's been really interesting. I'm sorry we didn't talk more about pharma. I realized we went down the networking route, but
well, you know what this means? It means we probably need to have another conversation.
Oh, it does. That would be good. That would be great.
Maybe on a platform of yours. I don't know. I think.
Yeah, do you know? I would love it if you were to come onto my YouTube channel and discuss a little bit, because you work in translation, don't you, for the pharma industry?
Yeah, exactly.
That would be really. That would be a really interesting topic for me, because I'm trying to interview a lot of people working in the communication space in pharma.
Mm-hmm.
But you're the only person I know who works specifically in translations.
Well, there you go.
And I guess accessing different marketplaces for pharma products.
There you go. There's our second conversation.
Okay.
And then,
Sounds good.
but for the listeners and the people who watch Papa PhD, maybe we could have another conversation on here about the day-to-day in the pharma space, because I think there's a lot of doubt of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I've had conversations where I've learned that the pace at which you drop projects if they're not working is much different than on the academia side. But I'm sure that having been there for a while, there's more that you can share about what people can expect once they're in an organization like that. So we'll meet again for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to share more of that. I really would. I think that's an important topic as well.
Perfect. Then it's a deal. Okay. We'll just need to find a date.
Cool. Thanks a lot,
Vicky.
David. Lovely speaking to you again.
It was great, and take care too, and all the best with all your projects.
Yep. Catch up soon. Bye.
Bye.